So before we get started, I just wanted to let you all know that we will be placing everybody on mute unless you are a panelist, and that's just to minimize any background noise. We will be opening the lines at the end of the webinar to invite you to ask questions or share reflections with us. And so when the line is open, so Brad, you can go ahead and mute everybody right now. So when the line is back open, just please remember to mute and unmute yourself by using 4*. And please use that function just so that we avoid any chance of sometimes people's phones put music on when we're on hold or mute. So use 4* when the lines are open, and we'll let you know when that's happening. Also, just as a precaution, if you could please silence your cell phones. And we will be recording this webinar today. We're going to have the recording available at the ACF website so that other people who weren't able to join us today can access the information. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. So I'm going to hand this over briefly to our colleague Angie Godfrey, the Regional Program Manager in the Office of Head Start Region 11.
Thank you very much.
Muted.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It is my honor and pleasure to be with all of you today, and I welcome you to this webinar. It's certainly exciting for many reasons. My heart always skips a little when people say what Michelle just said, that this is the first national study of AIAN programs. And many of you have been familiar with FACES for years as a national study, but it was a study that did not include Region 11 AIAN. So we're so excited to hear some of the first findings, information from the study today. And I just want to remind you who we are in the next slide, just briefly. Region 11, American Indian Alaska Native region, serves programs in 26 states. We serve federally recognized programs, federally recognized tribes. We work with sovereign nations and consortiums of federally recognized tribes. The two small, first the big map, which shows you where we are, all of the lower 48 and into Alaska. And then two graphics on the bottom explain even more in more detail who we are. On the one, as you're looking, the first one is Region 11, where the light blue, and Region 11 serves half of the American Indian Alaska Native children in Head Start. As you can see, the other half are spread throughout regions 1 through 10, geographic regions, in urban Indian programs served by agencies, or just served in funded and regionally funded, Region 1 through 10 programs. Another important thing to understand, if you look at the second graphic, is that, as I said, we serve programs primarily on reservations or near reservations to enrolled members, children of enrolled members, children who are enrolled members of tribes or eligible to be enrolled members. But you'll see there's also a small percentage of children we serve who are not AIAN children. Our focus will be, as we're looking at this, the forefront will certainly be with AIAN children as we're looking at FACES and gathering information in this national study, but the whole, if you look at the chart as a whole of Region 11, it includes all children who are enrolled in AIAN programs. So again, I just want to welcome to you to what is such an important day in our lives of understanding ourselves and our work and having a data resource and information that will help us not only do our work better, but help nationally to build an understanding of AIAN programs and the work they do with their children and families. So thank you again. And my second pleasure of the afternoon is to introduce the presenters today, and you'll be hearing from Drs. Elizabeth Malone and Jerry West from Mathematica Policy Research Center, from Ms. Jackie Haight, the Port Gamble S'Klallam Tribe Head Start, and again more from Dr. Michelle Sarche from the University of Colorado Tribal Early Childhood Research Center. So put your little listening ears on and join us all for a wonderful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. So this is Michelle, and just briefly, here are our goals for this short time that we have together. We're going to give a brief overview of FACES, what is the Family and Child Experiences Survey, and what have we done to plan for the inclusion of Region 11 AIN programs for the first time. I'm going to cover that. Then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. West, who's going to describe a little bit about the AIN FACES study design and implementation. And then he'll turn it over to Dr. Lisa Malone, who will highlight some of the initial AIN FACES findings. This is a large data set, as you're about to hear. So we have just chosen some selected findings, but there is a lot more that these data are going to tell us about Region 11 children and families in the time that follows. And then we're going to turn it over to Jackie Haight, who's been one of many of our close tribal Head Start partners in planning, implementing, and now analyzing the data from this study. So she's going to provide some reflections from that perspective as a Head Start director. And then Lisa will talk a little bit about what's next after today. So Lisa, you can either hand it over or just advance for me, either way. The Head Start Family and Child Experiences Survey, or FACES, has been ongoing since 1997. It's been a regular source of nationally representative data on Head Start programs, centers, classrooms, and most importantly, the children and families that are served by those programs. With these data, FACES has provided a picture of Head Start children's school readiness with respect to health and physical development, their cognitive development, as well as social emotional development. FACES data have also given us a picture of Head Start program performance, the quality of Head Start programs, and the kinds of child and family outcomes that are related to what's happening in Head Start. And FACES data can be used to track changes over time in the Head Start population, the quality of services, and again, those outcomes that we're seeing for children and families. And all of that information can be used to identify areas that Head Start can improve services to increase quality, to affect better outcomes in children and families, and basically to just best meet the changing needs of the Head Start population. So Lisa, you can go to the next. But historically, Region 11, or AIN Head Start programs operating in those federally recognized tribal communities that Angie was talking about, have not been included in FACES. And so all of that information from 1997 until just now never included the experiences or the perspectives of Region 11 Head Start children and families or programs. And some of those reasons include tribal concerns about research in general, and probably many of you are familiar with some of the concerns that tribes have about research in ways that historically research has either caused harm or just not served them well. It has to do with the unique protocols for research involving sovereign tribal nations. As a researcher, you go through a lot of layers of official approval in each tribal community that you partner with. And part of those protocols are in place because of those historical concerns about research. And to do research in the right way, in ways that are in line with best tribal practices, is a very resource-intensive process, both in terms of time and the money that goes along with making this happen in the right way. And so as a result of, again, not being included in FACES to this point, like I said, national descriptions of Head Start have not included the experiences or perspectives of Region 11 programs, children, and families. And Region 11 itself has lacked important national level data on children and families they serve. And without these data, Region 11 is at a disadvantage, again, for knowing nationally across all those Region 11 programs, I think there's over 150 of them, knowing the needs of children and families in all of Region 11. And in turn, how best Head Start can meet those collective needs of children and families across Region 11. Next slide. So a few years ago, we had the opportunity to begin planning for the inclusion of Region 11 AIAN Head Start programs for the first time in phases. The lack of inclusion in phases had long been known to our federal partners and to tribal Head Start program directors and leaders and to researchers. We knew that that was a significant gap in our understanding of Head Start. And so we were really excited to have this opportunity to dedicate the time and the energy and the resources that it would take to make this happen again in the right way. So at the center of planning for this study, from the very beginning to now when we have data and how those data are being analyzed and shared and what are the priorities for analyzing and sharing those data, this work group that you see that's comprised of Region 11 Head Start directors. There's been about 13 of them over the years who've been our closest partners in this work. Tribal early childhood researchers such as myself and colleagues at Arizona State University and Michigan State University. Our ACF federal staff have been close partners from start to now, as well as the study research organization. That's our colleagues Lisa and Jerry, Drs. Malone and West at Mathematica Policy Research. We've all come together. We've had opportunities to share more in depth about the planning process, and we're not going to go into all of that detail here. But again, it's been an intensive, collaborative effort. I know that the standard for research with tribal communities is that focus on community. Often community is defined with specific individual tribal communities, but here our community that is the community of community-based participatory research has been this work group, and we've also made great efforts to reach out to other critical tribal stakeholders in the planning process. So I'm really excited. We're all really excited to have those data collected and to begin to share the first findings. So with that, I am going to turn over to Dr. West, and we'll let him to the next slide. Thank you.
Good day. I'd like to spend a few minutes describing the design of the American Indian Alaska Native FACES that emerged from the collaboration discussed by Michelle and our experience conducting this first ever study of Region 11 Head Start. AIN FACES is designed to inform policies and practices that address the needs of Region 11 children and families. It will serve as a rich source of data that will be used to describe the children and families who are served by Region 11 and to identify the strengths and needs of the children and families who are being served. Data from the study will also be used to describe the school readiness skills of Region 11 children and how they compare to children of similar ages in the general population and to other Head Start children in Regions 1 through 10. The data will also be used to explore how Region 11 children's Head Start experiences and home life are associated with better child outcomes. Listed on this slide are some of the key features of the study. AIN FACES is a source of national data on Region 11 Head Start. It's not a study of any one program or any one tribal community. It's a descriptive study of Region 11. It's not an evaluation of Region 11 Head Start or how effective programs are in meeting the needs of children and families who are served. The study is very complex, with data being collected from Region 11 children and their parents and teachers, and from program and center directors. The study also includes observations of Head Start classrooms. AI in Faces is a study of the children and families served by tribal programs in Head Start Region 11. It does not include the American Indian Alaska Native children who are served by programs in Head Start Region 1 through 10, which was mentioned earlier. So it's really a study just of Region 11. But almost half, as was noted earlier, almost half of all American Indian Alaska Native children in Head Start are served by tribal programs in Region 11 and are represented in the study. While AI in Faces has a strong interest in the American Indian and Alaska Native populations in Region 11, the study is not limited to those children and families. It includes both tribal and non-tribal children and families. And as we saw earlier, a large majority of the children in Region 11 programs are American Indian or Alaska Native. That's about 86%. Our goal was to have about 800 children and their parents participate in the study. To achieve this goal, we selected a random sample from the programs, all programs in Region 11. Next, we selected random samples of Head Start centers in those programs, classrooms in the centers, and then finally children in those classrooms. In order to answer questions about Region 11 Head Start, we collected data from several sources, including the sampled children. Children's school readiness skills were assessed in two ways. The children participated in a 45-minute one-on-one direct assessment of their skills in several areas that included language, literacy, math, and executive function. And children's Head Start teachers reported on the children's school readiness skills, problem behaviors, and approaches to learning. Child assessments were administered and teacher-child reports were collected in the fall and spring of the program year. And teams of mathematical staff visit each of the sample programs to administer the child assessments. All staff involved in working with Region 11 program staff, children, and families were required to complete a training program where each program emphasized the importance of building rapport with children, parents, and staff, and the trainings were designed to prepare staff to work effectively and respectively in tribal communities. Information about children's family and Head Start experiences comes from several sources. Parent surveys are used to collect information about children's family and home and their community, relationships to their community, as well as their Head Start experiences. Head Start staff surveys, including teacher surveys and director surveys, provide information about the background and experience of Head Start staff, also information about the different characteristics of classrooms and programs, as well as information about the cultural and native language resources and opportunities that are available to children and families. The classroom observations are used to assess Head Start classroom quality and the quality of teacher-child interactions, as well as provide information on children's exposure to tribal culture and native language. The parent surveys were completed in the fall and spring. The director and teacher surveys were answered only once in the spring, and the observations were done only once in the spring. Now let's take a quick look at our experience conducting AI in Faces this past year. We were able to successfully recruit 20 programs for the fall 2015 data collection and one additional program for spring 2016. So altogether, 21 programs, or 68% of the programs that were sampled and invited to participate, did so. We had very high rates of participation once tribal approval was obtained and programs were on board. Parents were very receptive to their child participating in the study, and Head Start directors and teachers were very supportive of the study and its goals. 93% of parents agreed to have their child participate in the study, and 90% of the centers that were selected participated, and 100% of the classrooms that were selected participated. This table shows the participation rates for each of the data collection instruments. As you can see in the table, the rates of participation were very high for all the instruments. So now I'd like to turn things over to the AIM FACES project director, Dr. Lisa Malone, who will share some of the first findings of the study. So, Lisa?
Thanks, Jerry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all for letting us be able to share some of these findings. They are selected, and they focus on the fall 2015 data collection. As Jerry had noted, and Michelle, with the AIM FACES work group, we've really worked in even looking at these first findings to support AIM FACES aim to describe all the children in Region 11, and in particular understanding the cultural, tribal, and linguistic diversity of those children and families, with, again, these findings in hopes that the data will help to inform policies and practices that will address the needs of Region 11 children and families. So today I'm presenting some findings that will draw from specifically the child assessments that Jerry described, the parent surveys, and the teacher's report of children, in particular around child and family characteristics, children's language, literacy, and cultural experiences, some information on family resources and needs based on the fall, and a picture of children's development at the beginning of the program year. So first, we begin with a description of the children and families in tribal Head Start programs, trying to help programs and policymakers understand who is Region 11 serving. And what we see, the slides that follow, they show us that Region 11 Head Start serves young children from diverse families. First, we see that the majority of children who are attending Head Start are in their first year. That is, that this does not include early Head Start participation, so we see that 74% of the children in Region 11 are newly entering. And if among those children, 64% of them are 3-year-olds, but there are 1/3 who are 4-year-olds. And so this helps us see what experiences children have had to date in Head Start in a given year. Further, if we want to consider the background of children, we see that based on parent report, most but not all Region 11 children are American Indian or Alaska Native. That's either alone or in combination with another race, which presents a similar picture that we've said before. As a picture of who lives with the children in Region 11, parents were asked to provide information on all the people who are normally living in the household with the child. And what we see is that most children live with at least one biological or adoptive parent. That is 90% of the children. And further, slightly more than half of Region 11 Head Start children live with both of their biological or adoptive parents. Further, we see that those households are intergenerational, with almost 1/4, that is 23% of children are living with a grandparent or a great-grandparent. And that's demonstrating really across these slides, again, that the children and their families and their households that Region 11 are serving are diverse. If we want to have a snapshot of considering the language and learning environments of children, both in the home and in the community, we wanted to try to show here what Region 11 children's home and community experiences are. We begin to see with these select findings that culture and language are important to Region 11 Head Start families, but the practices vary. For example, parents were asked to indicate if languages other than English are spoken in the home by anyone, and as you can see by these two graphs, that a tribal language is spoken in 1/3 of the homes. That's the set of bars on the left. But if you look on the right side of that black line, most children's primary language is English. That is, we see that the language that's primarily spoken to the child at the home is English. We see that about 4% of children have a tribal language as the primary language that's spoken to them at the home. However, while there is the tribal languages present in at least 1/3 of the homes and not often the primary language that's spoken to the child, we do see that parents believe that it is important that their child learn the tribal language across all households, regardless of what language is spoken or what is primary, with 54% of Region 11 children's parents indicating it is very important that their child learn the tribal language, and another 34% feeling it's somewhat important that their child learn the tribal language. Parents were also asked in the fall if their children had participated in various activities with community members in the past month. These activities included listening to elders, participating in traditional ways, dancing, singing, or drumming, working on traditional arts and crafts, participating in traditional ceremonies, or playing American Indian or Alaska Native games. Looking across all of those particular activities, we see that most children, 80%, have engaged in at least one such community cultural activity in the past month. The most common activities were listening to elders tell stories, participating in traditional ways such as hunting or dancing, and the third most common was also dancing, singing, or drumming, and all of these were done by 40 to 48% of children. So next, what we'll consider is again, select picture on what Region 11 families' resources and needs are, which may help programs identify how to support the families they're serving. What we see in the findings that we'll show next is that families in Region 11 expressed having access to financial resources, but many still have needs related to their economic and psychological well-being. For example, in terms of financial resources, parents were asked if they felt they could afford the kind of home, clothing, food, and medical care they needed. If they disagreed or strongly disagreed that they had enough money for any of these four types of needs, they're considered to be reporting a significant financial strain. What we see is that a majority of Region 11 parents report they do not experience a financial strain and that they felt they did not have difficulty in being able to afford the kind of home, clothing, food, or medical care they needed. Another aspect of family resources is food security. As reported by the parents, we see that a majority of Region 11 children are living in homes that are considered food secure. That is, 73% of children are living in households that there was little to no indications of food access problems, such as having food that did not last or having to not having enough food money to afford food, or having limitations to that food, such as needing to skip meals. And that, however, there are up to 8% of children's parents that report a great deal of disrupted eating patterns or reduced food intake to be considered as having very low food security. So again, the majority are reporting food secure, but there are still those who have needs related to food intake and limitations. In addition to family economic well-being, Head Start Children's parents' psychological well-being provides important information on families' resources and needs. Parents, the majority of whom were children's mothers, completed items in the survey from an established scale for depressive symptoms. What we see them reporting is that a majority of parents do not report being depressed, but a sizable number do. That is, 58% of children's parents do not report levels of symptoms indicative of depression. However, 34% report levels of symptoms that may indicate being mildly or moderately depressed, and 8% report levels of symptoms that are indicative of potentially being severely depressed. So again, that provides a brief snapshot of the resources and needs of the families. Next, thinking about looking at how Region 11 children are doing at the beginning of the program year, we want to consider how they're doing in terms of cognitive, social, and physical development in the fall of 2015. We see that children's development is also diverse, but on average, their skills in a number of areas fall behind those of their same age peers. For example, we see here, this is a picture of their children's scores on vocabulary measures in the American Indian and Alaska Native Faces study at the beginning of the program year. The leftmost bar that you see is children's scores on the English receptive vocabulary measure, and next to that is the children's performance on our expressive vocabulary measure. The scores presented here are what we call standard scores, and so they are set to have a mean of 100. So if you imagine there would be a line at that 100 at the top of the graph you see, and it has a standard deviation of 15. And what this does is it provides information on children's performance relative to others of the same age. So looking first at receptive vocabulary, we see that Region 11 children's scores are below those of their same age peers. That is, it's below the mean of 100. They are scoring nearly 2/3 of a standard deviation below national norms in the area of English receptive vocabulary. In terms of their expressive vocabulary, children are performing closer to same-age peers. They score slightly under 1/2 of a standard deviation below the norms on English expressive vocabulary. As context, in fall 2014, children's scores from FACES, or those children in regions 1 through 10, were similar. Considering children's literacy and math skills based on a measure called the Woodcock-Johnson, we see here a picture of children's letter word knowledge, their early writing, and their early math skills. And these were all administered to children in AI and FACES. As on the previous slide, these are standard scores with a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15 for that relative performance to children of the same age. Region 11 Head Start children's literacy and math skills we see here overall are lagging behind those of their same age peers at the beginning of the program year. Looking first at the leftmost bar, we see that these children are scoring 2/3 of a standard deviation below national norms for the letter word identification area. Moving to the middle bar, Region 11 children score a full standard deviation below national norms on early writing and spelling from memory. And to the far right, children in Region 11 are scoring close to 2/3 of a standard deviation below national norms on applied problems, which measures early mathematics skills. As context, in fall 2014, children's scores in FACES were slightly higher than this. Turning now to children's socio-emotional development in the fall, this is where teachers reported on children's social skills and problem behaviors, and teachers are reporting that children demonstrate high social skills and few problem behaviors is what we see here. And as context, in fall 2014, for FACES, the scores were similar to what you see here, high social skills and low problem behaviors. Finally, the AI and FACES child assessment included direct measures of children's height and weight. Here we report the percentage of children by their body mass index, such that we use to create categories based on the definitions of the Centers for Disease Control, which specifies a child is considered to be overweight when his BMI score is at or above the 85th percentile but less than the 95th percentile, and obese if his or her BMI is at or above the 95th percentile for his age and gender. In the fall, we see that over 1/2 of children are normal weight, but many children are overweight or obese, a total of 42% being overweight or obese. That, again, is a brief selection of findings. So the question always next is, what can we do with this data? What does this data tell us? We shared some of these selective findings that we hope can be used to inform program and policy by various members in the community. The goal for AI and FACES is to provide federal, tribal, and program stakeholders with data that they can now use to make program and policy decisions. The findings are for Region 11 as a whole, a national picture of Region 11, and as such, one way the data can be used is for Region 11 as a whole, to argue for resources to address identified needs and to argue for changes to any policy and practice to better meet those needs. Additionally, individual programs in Region 11 could consider using the findings, even though they are for Region 11 as a whole, because they can use these study findings about Region 11 Head Start to think about how their program might be similar to or different from all of Region 11. Also, individual programs can use the data on Region 11 as a whole and their individual tribal data together to support the need for additional resources and services. For example, as part of working through determining what are the most important things to share, such as these selective findings with the AI and FACES work group, we've heard members discussing potential policy and program implications such as the following. One aspect could be to considering the diverse backgrounds of Region 11 children and families for thinking about service delivery. Another could be that it really does show that supporting cultural and linguistic heritage is something to be thought about more, and as well as trying to build on home, community, and program connections. Another potential policy and program implication could be to use this data to help understand the resources or families and the quality of such resources. And finally, another area that policy and program implications can draw upon this data is to help identify areas of child development to enhance program initiatives in supporting, such as fostering cognitive skills and reducing child obesity. And so now, for more thoughts on potential implications from the data and just the study overall, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Haight.
Thank you, Lisa. And I just want to share my appreciation for those that have been on the phone and those who have been a part of this many-year process for the project to come to the place where it is right now. And I'm just honored that I was asked to participate with the colleagues who are researchers and those who will be looking at these findings in much more depth than I, but I want to focus on, we celebrated at the research conference in July with other directors just the process that we went through and the time and resources, as Dr. Sarche mentioned earlier. It took a lot of federal resources to do this right. And we directors that were together stood up and celebrated that. We have to acknowledge that this is the first time. We can't say that enough. Angie said it when she welcomed you. This is the first time. It's 2016, and we have some data, and we've been out in programs, and we respectfully reached out to those tribal nations. And as you saw from Dr. West's slides, the response was incredible. And so we want to honor those staff, those tribal leaders, and those families and children for trusting. And I can't say enough about that trust. And, you know, the opportunity for us as directors and programs and tribal leaders that we now have a story. We've known lots of pieces of the story, but now we have the findings from this study to wrap our brains around as a collective. And knowing that it isn't just one story, it's not a story about one tribe, it is about a collective. And as Lisa described under, you know, potential for policy and program implications, I know that we've needed the story. We've needed some numbers and opportunities to present at a national level our successes, our challenges, and our needs. And that's how we can affect some change to benefit our children and families in all of our varied communities across the country. We want to help inform decisions that OHS can move forward with in consultation with our tribal leaders. And we want to continue to have those conversations with congressmen who can help to make decisions to support. You know, I'm really looking forward after some of the information memorandums that have been coming from Office of Head Start in supporting culture and language immersion programs and supporting all of us in our communities, because we know it's so important for our children and families to continue to have that connection. And there's been lots of struggles, but these findings can help us to stress the importance and to do more reflection. I think that for me, in looking at the findings as we continue as directors to be part of some of the analysis and looking at, and as reports come out, that all of us in our communities across the country, not only the directors, but our managers and our policy council families, we can look at these findings and ask questions. It's an opportunity for us to expand our knowledge base in our own communities by reflecting on the findings. It's such an opportunity for us to inquire, and as more findings come out, to sort of really look and say, what could alternative explanations be? There's never one answer, I think. And the more that we open up the dialogue within our communities, I think we're demystifying in looking at our own data that we gather and what we're seeing at the national level, and looking for a path that can take us to expanding our own resources and work towards gaining more outcomes, successful outcomes for our children and families. And I always want to say that we have to acknowledge that there's limitations around all research, and there's strengths that come from it. And, you know, this study, the strength of it has been, as I was reflecting earlier, in, I think, the trust that's been established in the process. And I hope we can build on that in future years, and really look forward to AIAN Region 11 having another AI FACES study, and that we're building on what we learned through this process. And the most important thing for me has been, you know, I've been talking about research now for a number of years, and participating in some really important work in looking at how we have to develop a new generation of our AIAN early childhood researchers to carry on this work. I know in my own program I can tell the story that I've been talking about my experiences as I've been living it, and encouraging some of my teachers who are looking at the next piece for their careers and saying, have you ever thought about research? Because that's what we really need, is to have more of our own community AIAN researchers doing this work and helping us to take the time to understand our children and families. And each year is different, and each year brings a new challenge. So knowing that it will never be the same, it will always be changing. So I just want to appreciate the time, and I look forward to any questions or comments that might come later. So thank you.
Jackie. Then as a brief picture of what's ahead, this again was selected findings from the fall data collection. But as Jerry noted, we again surveyed parents and asked teachers to complete information about the children and assess the children in the spring, as well as asked teachers and directors to complete surveys and observe the classrooms. So we will shortly begin looking at the data that were collected in the spring. And we are continuing to discuss, as with the work group, what is the most important things to be reporting and the best way to report the findings to different audiences. After the initial reporting, the data will be available for other researchers with the appropriate qualifications to analyze and report on this data. And that's a priority that was identified early on by the AI and FACES work group, and it was agreed to by all the participating tribes when they joined AI and FACES. For more information, here are some contacts of our project officers at the Administration for Children and Families, and my contact information. And also, this is a very long URL to memorize, but on ACF's website, there is a page for AI and FACES. So the recording from today and some information will continually be posted on that website. So I think now we'll turn over to Michelle to help us moderate some questions or comments from the audience.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks for your reflections, Jackie, as a Tribal Head Start Director. But yes, now we want to turn it over to all of you who are on the line. So Brad, if you could go ahead and unmute all of the callers. And again, as you are unmuted, just please be mindful that you don't put us on hold and give us the music. Please use 4* to mute and unmute yourself. So you're welcome also to type in questions into the chat box, or just speak up if you have any questions, observations, whatever.
I have a question, actually.
Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Reinl, and I'm with the National Center for Early Childhood Development, Teaching, and Learning.
Uh-huh.
And I'm new to this, so I'm learning. And I have a question of just the study when you talked about the language assessments that were given. I know you said that Woodcock-Johnson was used for some of the measures, but I didn't catch what the language assessment measure was.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Go ahead. Finish your question.
Oh, that's okay. I have a second part to the question, but why don't you answer that?
Okay. The English receptive vocabulary was measured by the 4th edition of the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, and English expressive vocabulary is measured by the 4th edition of the Expressive One-Word Picture Vocabulary Test, or the PBVT and the EOW-PVT.
Okay, thanks. So, and then my question is this, because I know that you're wanting to use the data to compare to all children or peers of the same age, but in terms of the cultural piece with how that gets measured on those particular instruments, has that, I guess what I'm wondering about is, or I'm just, that there can be like a deficit kind of way of approaching, or it can come out as a deficit rather than a cultural difference sometimes, and I'm just wondering how that was factored into all of those assessments.
Yeah, so, and definitely Jerry, Michelle, Jackie chime in. I think the one thing as the work group in the very early design stages, we had to make decisions about measures, and we wanted to make a decision about whether we should align to faces, adapt to reflect the cultural, or at times need to add measures. So in the child assessment, overwhelmingly, the decision was to align with faces, one, to have that the ability to have a comparison, but also the other piece of this was that this would be an opportunity to understand how the measures are working with a group of American Indian Alaska Native. And so the measures themselves are still administered in the traditional way and scored as the publisher developed them. I think in the one area we did try to understand and ask assessors for their thoughts. In another measure they do is to describe the children's behavior on a measure called the LIDER, and so we actually added some additional questions to help understand cultural aspects of understanding how it worked for them to administer that measure with Region 11 children. But overwhelmingly, the decision was to align with the measures, so to be able to have that national picture and to, again, understand the performance of measures. Michelle, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts about the cultural difference aspect in the measures.
Sure. And so that is a really important question. And again, as Lisa was highlighting, it's something that our work group took very seriously. is the selection of measures. And so again, we landed on the need to have data that would allow that sort of apples-to-apples type comparison with FACES with children in regions 1 through 10. But we also recognize the limitations of those measures that were not developed with the needs and experiences of American Indian and Alaska Native children in particular in mind. And so we are hoping that when those data become available, that there will be additional opportunities for researchers to really delve into, as Lisa said, I guess I'm just underscoring everything Lisa said, whether the statistical properties of these measures. Will have 900 observations of children on these measures, these nationally standardized measures. 86% of those children are AIAN. It's an unprecedented data set to really take a close look and a critical look at measures like that. And in terms of like the deficit approach, our work group is going to be working really closely with us in terms of how we frame these findings and that they're presented in ways that are sensitive and mindful of the complications of the measures as well as perhaps of some of the challenges that are genuinely faced by children served by Region 11 Head Start programs. So it's definitely an important question with, I think, complex answers, but this is an opportunity to grapple with those answers in ways I'm not aware of such a large data set of young tribal children that exists anywhere else.
Yeah, I would just, this is Jerry, I would just add too that we also, part of the training that we gave to our assessors, we spent a lot of time working with our staff to make sure that they understood, what it would be like to be working with Native children. We actually moved, we did some piloting with Native children to make sure we could bring that information in. We worked with the work group members to make sure that staff were sensitive to the types of cues that Native children may be given off when they're involved in assessments. Again, we're still administering the assessment the same way, but at least being sensitive to some differences in the way in which children may respond or shyness and so forth. So that was also built into it.
Someone had a comment in the chat box, and she shares, I am encouraged there is data to support the needs of AIAN grantees. So that was a comment. And it said, maybe a question here, were the non-Native children families' responses to language disaggregated from the data? I think it would make a difference in the importance of learning our tribal language. That's an excellent question, and I'll let you take that maybe, Lisa.
Yeah, so actually a very good question. That slide earlier was across all children, Native and non-Native. We are in the process, again, since the majority were American Indian Alaska Native, we are in the process of trying to look at the data separately for those children. And we did, at least initially for that item about the importance of tribal language, begin to explore among families that at least reported, if you remember that had two parts on that slide, and there were about 1/3 of the families that actually indicated a tribal language present in the home. And we started to look at least for those group of children. It's a smaller group. Michelle talked about 900 children. That's across everyone. So it's a much smaller group, but we do see a similar pattern with indicating a much higher percent those who do say very important. So we are trying to work to disaggregate that data. In particular, we have a sample size, like Michelle's been saying, about for the cognitive measures that we can begin to disaggregate and pull out just the American Indian and Alaska Native children in the study for things such as the background around culture and language. So we're in process with that. Good question.
And So one of the products that will be shared and accessible broadly is a technical report, which is going to have lots and lots of descriptive data on many different aspects that were assessed at the child, family, program, classroom level. And that technical report will have the data for AIAN children, though that 86% of the sample reported on separately from the sample as a whole. So we've definitely agreed that that's important to be able to understand the AIAN children in particular. Any other questions or comments? Well, I think we just have 5 minutes left, so I think it's a good time to turn it over to Angie, who will just offer a few closing comments.
Hello again, everyone, and again, thank you for joining today. There's so much rich information here, and it's just the tip of the information that we have to share. And just reflecting on a few of the comments, I really appreciate, in addition to the findings, talking about the process for getting here. It's really taken time, it's taken patience, and it's taken ongoing commitment to get us here, as well as someone mentioned funding, and funding is needed, but the ability of the researchers and the program staff and to work together and to bring again and again the message to the Office of Head Start has had a great impact on the work and trying to develop work that will benefit everyone. So I just would again thank everyone for the decades of work that have gone into this, and even longer. There's a history here, as I think Jackie said, that we will understand better and many people will benefit from. The other thing that I just want to say in closing is the impact the work will have on policies and decision making. I think it's true, it's at every level. They talked about at the program level, at the level of tribal nations, and at the federal level. And there's information in here for the first time, again, a national study providing us with information that can transform our decision-making and services to children and families in tribal communities and across the country. So I leave you as excited as I was when we started. I hope that all of you are. You'll have many more opportunities to hear about this work and to hopefully be able to use it and share with each other how it can be used as we move forward. So thank you again to all of the presenters and to all of you for being here today.
Thank you, Angie. And this is Michelle, and I just wanted to echo something that Jackie was highlighting, and that is those 21 tribal programs who participated. They are intentionally left with their identities kept confidential to protect the privacy and confidentiality not only of their communities but of the children and families in those programs who participated. But really wanted to give a special shout out to those programs who entrusted us with their children and families and allowed us to visit with their programs and to be a part of this study. It was a leap of faith, something that had not been done before. So if any of those programs are on the line, please do not identify yourself, but just know that there's deep gratitude for the particular leap of faith that you all took to be part of this effort. So I think that's everything. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.